Good day. I am Madeline Basilio, and I will be reporting on Chapter 5, Ethical Leadership, and I will be discussing the ethical theories, preferably the Utilitarianism, Communiitarianism, and Altruism. So before we discuss the ethical theories, let us first define what ethics and ethical leadership is. So the word ethics was derived from the Greek word ethos, which means character, custom, habit, or disposition. It is also called moral philosophy, the discipline concerned with what is morally good and bad and morally right and wrong. When these ethics, rights, dignity, and values are combined with leadership, it is now known as ethical leadership. Ethical leadership is not concerned about the immediate result, but it focuses on the long-term consequences, benefits, and drawbacks. Honesty, fairness, trust, and integrity are vital to ethical leadership. Although the question of ethics in public life has existed from the earliest times of human existence, it has achieved increased prominence as a result of globalization. Globalization has complicated the issues of ethics and accountability by enabling various formal and informal actors, both national and international, to intervene in the affairs of governments. It has also introduced new dimensions to public sector ethics. Issues relating to ethics and accountability are closely linked to the idea of public administration. The measure of ethics is tested in the implementation of public policies. Administrative law and ethics are developed as a field of public administration. Ethical public governance includes efficiency and effectiveness, openness, transparency, participation, and fairness. It will be interesting to assess the ethical challenges posed by globalization for public administration based on the general theories. An analysis of the most important theories will be useful to understand the deeper meaning and expectations of ensuring ethics and accountability. So we will now discuss the most significant theories, and I will start with utilitarianism. So what is utilitarianism? Utilitarianism is an ethical theory founded by Jeremy Bentham and developed and popularized by John Stuart Mill. So as the term suggests, utilitarianism is founded in the principle of utility, which adheres to the belief that an act is good or morally right if it promotes happiness and bad or immoral if it tends to produce pain. So the key, therefore, in utilitarianism is the principle of happiness. Hence, again, in utilitarianism, an act is good or morally right if it produces greatest happiness to the greatest number of people, and bad or immoral if it produces more harm or pain than benefits or happiness to the greatest number of people. This explains why the utilitarian would not care whether an action is done out of deception, lie, or manipulation, as long as it produces the maximum benefits to many people. For example, the act of condemning a terrorist to death is morally right for the utilitarian because this action produces equal benefits or greatest happiness to the greatest number of people concerned. Let us take the famous case of Robin Hood as another example. As a well-known, Robin Hood steals properties from wealthy people and gives them to the poor. From the standpoint of Christian ethics, Robin Hood's act is immoral because it deprived the wealthy people of the rights that is due to them. However, from the standpoint of utilitarianism, Robin Hood's act is morally good because it produces maximum benefits, that is greatest happiness to the majority of the people. Now, Let us discuss the Jeremy Bentham's model of utilitarianism. And let's start by asking the question, how does Bentham view happiness? Well, for Bentham, happiness is simply the absence of pain. And so Bentham introduced the philosophic calculus. And the philosophic calculus measures the degree of happiness or pleasure that a specific action may produce. The philosophic calculus is also called utility calculus or hedonistic calculus. It includes intensity, duration, certainty, propinquity, fecundity, purity, and extent. And so for Bentham, the intense the pleasure, the better. The longer it lasts, the better. The more certain that it will happen, the better. The closer that it will occur, the better. The greater the possibility that it will be followed by another pleasure, the better. The purer the pleasure, the better. And the greater the number of people that it benefits, the better. So the formula of Bentham's philosophic calculus goes like this. Happiness less pain is equal to balance. For Bentham, the balance is the basis of the morality of an action. In other words, for Bentham, if the balance is in favor of happiness, then the act is morally right. And if it is in favor of pain, then it is morally wrong. Now, how do we do this? Well, Bentham said that we just need to sum up all the pleasures and pains produced by the action. If the balance is in favor of bliss, then the act is morally right. But if the balance is in favor of pain, then the act is morally wrong. Now, let us put it in simple mathematical calculation. So, if an act produces 12 pleasures and 6 pains, then the balance is 6, which is in favor of pleasure or happiness. Hence, if this is the case, then for Bentham, the action is morally right. However, if the act produces 20 pains and just 5 pleasures, then the balance is 15, which is in favor of pain. If this is the case, then for Bentham, the act is morally wrong. Now, let us proceed to the John Stuart Mill's model of utilitarianism. It is important to note that Mill disagrees with Bentham. Mill argues that we cannot calculate the amount of pleasure or pain that an act produces. So for Mill, the philosophic calculus of Bentham cannot be the basis of morality, but the majority of the people that attains happiness. So the famous utilitarian claim that an act is morally right if it produces greatest happiness to the greatest number of people, and it is morally wrong if it produces more pain than pleasure to the greatest number of people concerned. As we can see, utilitarianism is considered qualitative since the philosopher Mill emphasizes intellectual pleasure than sensual pleasure. Thus, his famous saying goes, "It is better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a pig satisfied." Maybe by this, he means that no reasonable person would be a pig just for the sake of being more comfortable. He may prefer quality rather than quantity of things. So basically, it is better to think than just to accept things as it is. It is better to be a human with sense of wisdom than to be a pig that cannot make its life better. Next, we also have what we call the Accutilitarianism. Accutilitarianism holds that the utilitarian principle should be applied to a particular act or situation or circumstance. in a particular situation or circumstance. It takes into account the possible results of each act. For example, pharmaceutical companies release drugs that have been approved by the government, but with known minor side effects because the drugs is able to help more people than other bothered by side effects. For example, the marijuana, it is a drug that there is more beneficial if it is to treat for some patients with conditions that can be treated by marijuana and not for drug abuse. So still, even if there is a side effect with that drug, it is still given because it is more beneficial for the patient. So the basis of the morality of an action is the act itself. Hence, in Accutilitarianism, we should perform those actions that produce greatest happiness to the greatest number of people concerned. Now, there is also what we call the rule utilitarianism. Rule utilitarian focus on the effects of actions that stem from certain rules or moral guidelines, example, the Golden Rule, the Ten Commandments, or laws against murder. If an action conforms to a moral rule, then the act is moral. For example, when faced with multiple simultaneous patients in the emergency department, it is important to have a way of reaching a decision quickly about which patient to attend to first. Triage rules are potentially justified by a form of rule utilitarianism that enables rapid, intuitive decisions. Let us take again as an example the act of condemning a terrorist to death. And so, an act utilitarian would ask the question, what possible good or evil results from this act? If the majority of the people are benefited by the act itself, then it is moral. While a rule utilitarian, on the other hand, would ask whether is there a rule or law that condemns terrorists to death, and whether this rule was formulated based on the utility principle. If this is the case, then it may be morally right to sentence a terrorist to death. It says that in any given situation, you should choose the action that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. But sometimes the act that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number can seem just wrong, just like the example in this video. So let's watch this.
Utilitarianism also has trouble accounting for values such as justice and individual rights. For example, assume a hospital has 4 people whose lives depend upon receiving organ transplants: a heart, lungs, a kidney, and a liver. If a healthy person wanders into the hospital, his organs could be harvested to save 4 lives at the expense of 1 life. This would arguably produce the greatest good for the greatest number, but few would consider it an acceptable course of action, let alone the most ethical one. So, although utilitarianism is arguably the most reason-based approach to determining right and wrong, it has obvious limitations.
So that example is the limitation of utilitarianism, because you should also consider which is more ethical. So now we go to
Utilitarianism also has trouble accounting.
We will now go to the communitarianism. So the concept of communitarianism believes that people live in communities and must therefore be encouraged to act according to the common good. The major theme of communitarianism is indeed the common good. And the theory, therefore, discourages selfish and unethical behavior. Communitarians emphasize that societies face common problems and they urge people to rise above individual, group, and organizational interests. Communitarianism is a philosophy that emphasizes the connection between the individual and the community. Although the community might be a family unit, communitarianism usually is understood in the wider philosophical sense as a collection of interactions. A communitarian philosophy is based upon the belief that a person's social identity and personality are largely molded by community relationships, with a smaller degree of development being placed on individualism. In short, balancing the rights and responsibilities of individual with rights and responsibilities of the community. For example, a child born in the Philippines speaks in Tagalog fluently, not Japanese, whereas a child born in Japan speaks Japanese fluently and not Tagalog. This is based upon the belief that a person's social identity and personality are largely molded by community relationships. Another example, a man living in a community where computer technology is already available may become a skilled person in software domain. On the contrary, a man living in a remote community that has not witnessed the growth of information technology will not have adequate software skills. Then this emphasizes the connection between the individual and the community. Communitarians believe that rights and responsibilities are intimately related. It focuses on a new concept of rights where common good is given importance. A new concept of positive rights is propagated wherein a wide variety of rights like state-subsidized education, state-subsidized housing, safe environment, universal healthcare are demanded for the community members. A synthesis between rights and responsibilities is advocated by certain thinkers who belong to responsive communitarianism. So we'll now proceed to altruism. Altruism means acting in the best interest of others rather than in one's own self-interest. It is the unselfish concern for other people that is doing things simply out of a desire to help, not because you feel obligated to, out of duty, loyalty, or religious reasons. Values associated with altruism are compassion, hospitality, empathy, generosity, and concern for others. Some people believe that altruism constitutes the essence of morality. Although we often act selfishly, we also seem to be wired to cooperate with others. For example, studies show that when people look for mates, they tend to look for kindness more than any other quality. And people's moral judgments are often driven by emotion. And empathy for others seems to encourage altruism. Another emotion called elevation appears to inspire altruistic behavior too. We feel elevation when we see another person acting virtuously, such as by helping someone in need. Altruism also builds social connections. Studies shows that people who are altruistic tend to be happier, to be healthier, and to live longer. So while altruism leads us to do what's best for others, it also makes us feel good in the process because it is doing things purely for the benefit of others without expecting to get anything out of it yourself. That's it for my report, and thank you.